Prepare to be captivated by the business story of the week, hosted by me, Shaheen Shan. Join us on a journey through the twists and turns of entrepreneurial triumphs and setbacks. Immerse yourself in the narrative and witness the magic that turns dreams into reality. This is Business Story of the Week.
And we are back. Welcome once again, ladies and gentlemen. This is Josh. I am your co-host for Business Story of the Week, where we navigate the world of innovation, business, uncovering stories of perseverance, struggles, and success. And our guest today is no stranger to innovation. John Paller is a Denver-based blockchain entrepreneur, inventor, and futurist, and he is the founder and executive steward of Opolis, a digital employment cooperative for independent workers. He is also the founder and executive steward of ETH Denver. We're going to get into that in a bit. The world's largest Web3 and Ethereum-based festival. Prior to discovering Ethereum in 2015, John spent more than 15 years in the talent acquisition, HR technology, and employment systems, building multiple successful enterprises. John brings a breadth of experience in fundraising, investor relations, community outreach, and crypto economies, guiding his vision of democratizing employment and growing decentralized communities. In 2014, John was awarded 40 under 40 by the Denver Business Journal for his contributions to shaping the future of business. And what an introduction there, John. We need to talk about this. But first of all, how are you? How are things in Denver?
It's great. You would not think it's January in Denver. It's 65 degrees right now. And it's beautiful, beautiful. They're just giving us a little foreshadowing tease of, it's actually like that quite often during around ETH Denver, but it's great. We're good. We're just, we're in go time. So we're heads down, just, making sure that we dot our I's and cross our T's. And, there's a lot of moving parts and pieces that we got to keep after. So we're just, we're on the home stretch. Getting ready.
All right. That sounds great, John. And I'm so glad to have you here. And let's get right into it. You are a visionary when it comes to this space. You are a blockchain visionary. But I always like to start the journey where it all began. Could you tell us about your experience, your early experiences, first of all, in talent acquisition, HR technology, and combining that with blockchain? Seems like an how you call this, an unlikely pairing. But I'd like to know how it all started for you and how it all came together to today, being the visionary that you are.
Yeah, it's quite a story, actually. In 2000,
I love stories.
2005. So I'm dating myself. Okay. In 2005, I was talking with some of my, coworkers about, the business that we had built or that we were building. And it really struck me that the way people get treated in employment, right? So most of my experience was sort of like we were leasing people to companies, so like a contracting staffing company kind of thing, recruiting firm. And then I was like, well, we had a really big problem trying to get people, high quality people, to do these contracts, right? We couldn't get them to do them because they're like, well, I really want a perm job, is what they would say, which means permanent. And it's like, well, is there really anything such thing as a permanent job anymore? And you started, this is before the gig economy, before any of that. And I'm just like, you listen to what people say about how they're treated, and I was just like, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, what if we treated people better? Wouldn't they be more productive?
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like pretty obvious to me. So then, but you look at the way, sort of the architecture of these systems is designed. It's very paternalistic. It's very subjugating. It's very extractive. And there really aren't incentives based on who makes decisions economically. There aren't incentives to actually optimize for worker productivity. it's all about optimizing for spend.
Right.
So if you're optimizing for spend, you're going to diminish the human experience because it just becomes procurement, right? So then I would talk about this a lot. I'm just like, the HR world since the 80s has commoditized work. We talk about people as human capital, and it's like we're sort of dehumanized. It's not personal, it's just business. It's like, this is their paycheck, dude.
Exactly.
Like, what are you talking
Okay,
about?
yeah.
It's not personal. Of course it's fucking personal.
Mm-hmm.
You can put whatever lipstick you want on the pig, but it's still personal, right? What they're highlighting is there are misalignments of incentives and priorities. So when decisions are made that don't align with the workers, you just rationalize that by saying, well, it's not personal. It's just business decisions.
Exactly, yeah.
But then you see the fallout of that, the breakdown of systems, the erosion of quality brands, the dehumanization of people, the lack of worker productivity. And then we just see this cycle go where it just creates huge amounts of inefficiencies in these markets, right? And even for people's lives from the worker perspective, ask them, well, there's one particular statistic that stood out to me that was just like really stunning. And that is the engagement statistic.
Right.
So the percentage of people who describe themselves as engaged is like 20%.
Oh, what? That's
of all workers in the US. So the disengagement number is like pushing 80%. So what does that mean for productivity? Just, anecdotally, I don't need data to know that if I'm not engaged, I'm not going to be terribly productive. They've made movies about this meme, right? Well, Bob, I do it, at most 15 minutes of actual work in any one day, just enough not to get fired, right? Now we can laugh at it, but you think that's not what's going on? Absolutely,
what's going on. Yeah,
absolutely. Now, if you think about all the players involved, so look at that from both the worker side, they're not happy. They're doing it as a means to an end. And then you look at the corporations who are paying for these services, who are frankly overpaying for what they're getting. They're not overpaying on an hourly basis. They're just overpaying in general. Because if I'm doing 15 minutes of work in one day, but then we complain about how we're not taking care of employees. But you can understand it from both sides. You can understand it from the business side saying, well, look, we're not getting the productivity necessary to pay more. And then from the worker side, you're like, well, I have no incentive or motivation to do anything but the bare minimum.
Right, exactly.
And I only really stick around in the US especially to get my healthcare insurance because I can't get it otherwise. So there's a lot of social reasons why this model exists. So I started talking about the concept of democratizing employment in 2005.
Wow.
Now this is way before anything I knew about crypto or blockchains or anything. And the first several experiments were sort of inside the walls of this existing business.
Right.
And the conclusion of those experiments were there are no incentives for the corporate customers that we have to care about productivity.
Right.
They want productivity, but not at the expense of price.
Exactly.
If you can give them a better price and productivity, you'll do great. But you'll only scale to a certain amount because you can't get through the sort of cognitive thinking of procurement departments in large companies on value. It's always on price. They don't care. So if you're selling yourself on ethos, they're just like, yeah, that's great, but what are you going to charge me, right? But then you can't sustain it because where do you think the money comes from to pay people more or give them benefits or whatever? It comes out of my profits. So if they're competing on price, which is what the big box shops do, and they drive the price down, they'll do loss leader stuff, they'll do all sorts of things, this competitive vulturing. And then they'll pay their people crappy and with no benefits, right? And so they keep the prices down, which is what the businesses want. But then I can't compete with that if I'm competing on value, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like, how do you compete? You can't. So the conclusions in those inside the walls experiments were you can't do it. You can't shift the needle. And then I started wondering whether or not that model of distribution or of just facilitating work was even viable long term. And one thing led to another. I started doing some outside of the walls experiments. So we had the core business going, but then we were experimenting with like next generation platforms, but we didn't know anything about blockchains or whatever. We were sort of in the Uber economy of things at that point, like 2013, 2014. And we were like trying to build like various things to try to like give people access to each other and create collaboration and all that. But without better technology tools that really help curate decentralization, it wasn't going to work, because what ended up happening is we ended up being the arbiter of everything. And then the minute you start making you right and you wrong, or settling disputes one way or the other, like that person leaves because you screwed them, and then they tell everybody that you screwed them, and then it takes like it's a vicious cycle, right? It is. So we're just like, how do you build something that's neutral, that lets people just kind of engage in what we would maybe call a next generation public utility infrastructure, where they can choose their adventure, but we're not creating a competitive environment, we're creating an additive environment. And what does employment look like in that context? And how do we give people the controls to make their own commercial decisions? Because right now, your employer, whoever that is, controls you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
whether you want to own that or not, that's true. Okay. And so we're like, well, what if we could replicate the other things that employment gives people?
You're right.
Without giving up their independence? Wouldn't that be cool?
That actually sounds cool.
So we did that. So now you can come to Opolis and you can get access to high quality, lower cost group healthcare insurance. Affordable, I guess, is maybe a better way to call it. But high quality. It's procured by a community of people like you. So it's not just being sold to you for profit. It's being provided as a benefit to people just like you. It's built by independent workers for independent workers. It's community owned, but not in a rah, kumbaya kind of way. It's egalitarian in that you will yield the benefit relevant to what you put into it. Okay. So it's a consumptive reward-based system, or a contribution-based system. And it's very elegant. And we're now running over $50 million in payroll annually.
Oh, wow. That's pretty, wow. Okay. I think that was the most mind-blowing. That's a great way to kind of end it, because $50 million in payroll for such a new concept. It's brand new. What it demonstrates though is what I've been talking about for a long time, is this latent desire for people to be independent. Precisely, yes.
and they're forget blockchains and the talking points and all this crap, but people are jaded, they're suspicious, they're cynical, and they're kind of tired. And they're distrusting, right? And it's like, and I wrote a whole white paper on this, this concept of the tragedy of the boardroom, which erodes alignment of incentives between consumers and stakeholders and shareholders over time, and ultimately creates a very hostile environment where economics becomes the thing that we fight over, and it becomes disproportionately unfair, and then rinse and repeat, right? So this is the tragedy of the boardroom, because ethos is not something that's legally mandated in most business models, okay? In a B Corp to an extent, but even B Corps have shareholders. Okay, and it's like, well, what do your shareholders want? They want maximized profits. Well, who does that come at the expense of? Your customers, whoever that is, and then your stakeholders, who happen to be the ones who are buying your services, like in an Uber model, it's your drivers and your riders, right?
Exactly.
The ones providing the profits are them, and at scale, Uber has a legal mandate, a fiduciary duty to maximize profits. It's a feature, not a bug. And so, how do you get around it? How do you fix that? It's designed that way, so you can sit and talk about it, how it's not fair, but it's designed that way. So, but instead of overcorrecting, where it's like, well, everything should be government owned, then everything should be everything should be public good, and there's no money, we just trade and love each other. It's like, well, that's bullshit, because you don't understand human behavior. So then but it's the middle. Okay, how do you create a for-profit model that is sustainable both from an economics, technological, and benevolence standpoint? So you provide goods and services that are not competitive but additive. So it's complementary. So the next member actually adds to the enterprise value. It doesn't create friction.
Yes.
And then, but you're providing services that they need, right? That help enable the life that they want. This is core to Web3. So we do this, and we do this, and we do this, and we do this, and we do this. And we built the entire product around that such that the concept of democratized employment that I had back in 2005 is actually 20 years later, 19 years later, being realized. And it has been a wild ride. I mean, if we had more time, I could tell you some stories that, like, you know, you read these books from people who talk about, you know, how, well, they said we were an overnight success, but it was 20 years in the making. That is that's where we are. I could probably write that book at some point.
Wow.
And for the amount of time, you always hear about, well, for the amount of times we almost died, or we didn't almost make payroll, or we, lions and tigers and bears. That's exactly my story. So it's like,
oh my goodness.
You know, you could say I'm an innovator, but I think I'm more just stubborn, and I just didn't leave, you know? So I got enough experience to be able to see around corners and sort of understand things a little bit more deeply and nuanced, in more of a nuanced way than most people.
Yeah.
So I just outlived everybody else.
Oh my goodness. John, you really need to write that book. I want that story. We don't have time for that now, but I would love to hear that story.
Well, a little foreshadowing. There is a few efforts underway. And what I've said to my teams and what I've said to the people around me who want me to write these things, I was like, look, nobody really cares what I have to say yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. It's like Naval. You know, Naval. I actually really appreciate this about Naval. A lot of people think he's, you know, just he's like a what did they call it? Like a fortune cookie, you know, talking points on Twitter. You know, where he's like little snippets of wisdom. Yeah. I really appreciate Naval though, because if you look at his journey, he's like, you know, I was saying all this stuff for 15 years and nobody gave a shit until I built Angel.co, and they correlate my credibility with that business, right? So like, in other words, they see the value manifested in Angel.co, and they're like, oh, well, he must have something interesting to say. So the same is for me. I don't care if people pay attention to me or not right now at all. I just focus on what I'm doing and trying to build. But I do also understand that there is a lot of really, I would say, my team would say, that we've gained very important life wisdom by being on this journey together. And at some point we'll share it, and at some point people will care. But right now we're just kind of getting ready and building and doing things. So then I just have one thing that I say usually, is just hand me another brick. Let's go. You know, let's go. Let's worry about that later. You know, I would never do a book. I would never write a book caring about what the sales would be on the book. But when I do it, I'll bet you it'll be pretty successful. I don't, but I wouldn't do it for that reason. Does that make sense?
For sure. Absolutely.
But we're going to wait until somebody cares. So if Opolis ends up being, let's say we get to 500,000 members or something, right?
There you go.
Let's say we got to 1 million members globally in 126 countries or some shit. Okay, I think people give a shit now, right? I mean, we're the world's largest employer in some cases. You know, we've got people all over the globe. We're enabling this sort of like fluid thing. It's member owned. People are rabidly passionate about it. You know, it's like, but it's a demonstration. It's a model of how we can take capitalistic concepts of value creation and combine it with benevolence. We can do both. Why wouldn't we want to do that? That would be so beautiful. Like, that's actually my entire purpose in life right now, is manifesting that goal in two different contexts. One in Opolis, which is the democratization of work using that type of model. And then the second is ETH Denver, which is the world's largest live action Web3 experiment, right? Like we're not just an innovation festival. I mean, we call it that. We're not a conference at all. We're an giant live action experiment. When you come to Eat Denver, you're engaging with technology and art and people and creative collisions and building, that meme we invented in 2018. We did all that. And it's like, it's pretty cool. Where else can you go do that? Where are you going to do that?
Exactly. Does it feel like the fruits of your labor somewhat, like having Eat Denver right now and just being in that space and having all that lots of fun? Like, it's a big festival, a very popular one. And does it feel like a reward of some sort?
Well, I think about it like, a parent would like a teenager maybe walking on the stage to graduate from college.
Okay.
Like, I don't own Eat Denver. It's not mine. The community owns it. Now, I'm a significant stakeholder and I have a large voice, but I'm not here building it for my own. Definitely there's selfish rewards that I get.
Okay.
Social capital. I didn't take any financial compensation until this last season. So for the first 5 seasons, I did it. I volunteered. It's now big enough where it can afford to pay me, and it's probably about time. And I don't think nobody cares. The board doesn't care. Nobody cares, because it's like, well, shit, dude, you did all that for free, and you built. Yeah, I did. Now I got my sport tokens, and sure, I'm a big stakeholder, and I got a big voice. But in the end, what I care about is giving people a big tent and a blank canvas to come and express themselves in a way that's meaningful for them. And then as a byproduct of that access, these creative collisions happen and then get turned into something. They get turned into like POAP or 1inch or Pool Together or, some cool projects that have been on my stages, right? And it's like, and then look at the inertia they build. So it becomes regenerative, right? And all we're trying to do is create a full cycle experience for the community. Now, if those projects get successful, the community also now benefits. So how do we create this full life cycle of thing where everybody's winning in this thing? So that's the point of like this live action experiment. Like we don't, we're not just running an event and selling tickets. We don't sell tickets. It's free. If you don't want to join the DAO for whatever reason, that's fine. You can opt out and you can buy a ticket. But if you join the DAO, which comes with literally no expectations of anything, there's no membership fees, there's nothing, it's just like, we just have to give you an option. Okay. If you don't want to legally join the DAO, if you don't want to do that, that's fine. But then you got to pay for a ticket. But if you just want to say, yeah, I joined the DAO, which is pretty much what it is, you can show up and it's free. Okay. And that's a compliance thing. That we don't do that because we want to. We do it because it's a compliance thing. Legally, we're a cooperative framework. So we've paired that with our DAO framework. The legal and the technological side are called a digital co-op. In any case,
digital co-op.
Yeah, we got a white paper coming out about it. It'll be out at Eat Denver. So we'll be actually talking about policy, compliance, regulatory landscape, a bunch because of just the topic is at hand, right? I mean, we're all looking at ETFs and what happens with people like SBF and, what other bullshit laws are they trying to build, on the heels of things that have nothing to do with it. So in any case, we just want to give people it's not about what I love about Eat Denver the most actually is its purity. Wow. Because there really isn't anybody's, under the hood, behind the curtain, behind the door, selfish interests driving decisions. It's all about creating an experience that inspires people to come and spark that creativity into the next thing, whatever that is. And then we just keep doing that thousands of times.
And isn't that like the core of what blockchain is, fundamentally?
I think so. I think, and that's why I'm saying, I think I 100% agree that if you really think about a future that's based on egalitarian systems, which is really what blockchains are, and, access, reducing barriers to entry.
Right, exactly.
Economic, geographical, or whatever, blockchain is a tool set that we're applying towards trying to create this total social outcome.
Precisely.
And so all we've done is said, well, okay, well, if we're going to say that, how ironic is it that we have these big giant corporate events where it's all, banks and other people paying for this shit?
Precisely.
And it's like, well, that doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, you're going to sit here and say it's all about this, but then you're doing this, and this is on its face lacks integrity. So we're just like, well, now look, we don't spend any time. I mean, I do throw some shade sometimes, not terribly publicly. I will to their face, but I'm like, I don't really understand. It seems like you're just trying to make money on this. So in other words, you've got enough influence that you're going to host an event. You're going to charge a bunch of money for tickets, get a bunch of your friends there, make a lot of money. But like, what are you really demonstrating? You're talking a lot. You're on stage, but then your sponsors are corporate interests and consulting firms and other things. It's like banks.
Yep.
It's like, is that really who should be benefiting from this?
Precisely.
Or how do we create better alignment there? So we've designed the entire thing to demonstrate the principles of Web3, which is why it's not just about the tech, it's about the social outcomes and the social inputs, right? So the social foundation, and then what comes out of that, and how do we create sustainability of technology, benevolence, and economics, right? So how do we do those three things inside the event format? And that's what we're doing.
Technology, benevolence, and
economics.
That is that's a great way to sum it up. It really feels like it's our chance. Like Web3 feels like the application of an opportunity for us to kind of like take the power back, so to speak, right? Because it really feels like it's all really skewed on that other side. It's way too skewed, and I love that you rattled everything out there in the sense that we are being devalued as humans when it comes to our being valued as not just employees, right? It's just in general, in the sense of this overly insurmountable power play. And
it's a parental structure, and it kind of doesn't matter if you want to go fight with your dad. Good luck.
Good luck.
But your dad's going to probably win, your mom, even in a maternal structure, like there's a hierarchical structure that not just socially, but legally, creates a power, hierarchy that it doesn't matter what you do. It's structural, right? So you have to shift the legal relationship and who's responsible for what. Because some of what happens is the risk that is associated with employment is burdened on the employer.
It is.
Okay, so if your behavior is on them, right? So like there is, and what do you think happens when people are layered on layered on layered risk? Well, they have to manage that risk, which means they have to then control behavior, which means this is where HR policies and all this other crap come from.
Yes, precisely.
Well, what if we could unbundle that and actually put the responsibility back on the individual? This is a core tenet of Web3. Now, what I find is interesting is I'm not sure people who like the idea of Web3 in some cases are actually ready for personal responsibility.
That is the point, isn't it? Right.
Well, look at DAOs. Look at how poorly V1 of DAOs were run. I mean, there's no metrics of performance. There's no productivity metrics. If you talk about that, it's like, oh, well, now you're being racist or sexist or whatever. It's like, knock it off, okay? If you're gonna be free, the cornerstone, there's two cornerstones that matter the most of anything when it comes to a healthy, free society or economic model. And this is something that every individual has an ability to accept. One is personal responsibility for yourself. And the second is the system must offer optionality. So the system offers this, not control, but optionality. The system offers optionality, and the individuals commit to personal responsibility.
Wow.
If you don't do those two things, it's not sustainable. It won't work.
It really doesn't. And it feels like you really truly have built that kind of, it's not just a community, but you've built it with these kinds of principles that is sustainable into a kind of this, into the future, really, right?
This is what, and so one of my mentors said to me early and, a long time ago, he's like, the most loving thing that you can do for somebody is to set a good example.
Wow.
Okay. So in a way, one of the things that bothers me about crypto conferences is they all get up there and about, even the World Economic Forum is 10 times worse. They're all horrible. Yeah. And it's like, and some of these ideas that people come up with are straight up terrible. I mean, I don't know that I want to go to evil, but I might. But like, do you actually think about the
exactly?
Do you actually think about the implications of like what this means for optionality and personal responsibility? And they don't. They think about control, and they think about like idealism, which is not humans. Humans are very non-linear, and you can't create a single standard for humans in behavior.
Right.
That's authoritarianism, and that's a path to destruction. And historically, anytime you've tried to homogenize society, whether it's in Asia or it's in Europe or it's wherever, it has ended very fucking badly.
Not good at all.
When it comes to the benevolence toward humans. And so you have to look at what really makes humans thrive, and it's optionality and it's personal responsibility. That's really what makes it happen. Okay? You're like giving me some fireworks here.
I don't know. I know who did that. Maybe that was your fault. They probably really loved what you just said.
Maybe I didn't do it, but
okay, John, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna put a punctuation on it. So when it comes to this example, I find that most conferences do too much talking,
right,
and not enough walking.
Right.
So there's actually a meme for this, not in too much talky, and not enough walkie. My friend Kevin. Because, he's a shipper, he builds, and it's like, that's the kind of thing that we want to focus on is how do we build, how do we ship, how do we experiment and build things that actually are going to take humanity into the next, and we're going to have to experiment with a lot of things. That's what ETHenver's for. But we got to show them how to do it.
Right.
Not just talk about it. Yeah. So ETHenver's about doing, where every other event that I'm aware of, every other event that's this size, this type of importance. Hackathons that are just hackathons, fine. I do wonder about their incentives sometimes, though, depending on who it is. But that's a different topic. The other ones that are just mostly conference-y stuff, right? Which is why we don't subscribe to the label of like conference, because it's like it's not really what we do. Yes, there's conference-y things that we do, but it's not a conference. So the conference-y stuff is just all talk.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's conjecture. It's I even affectionately refer to it as fart smelling, right? Where it's like, people get up on stage and they love hearing themselves talk and they love pontificating about all these things.
Taking it all in.
Take it all in and just, look at how fucking smart I am. Okay. And it's like, ugh, like.
Doesn't do anything.
Hand me a brick, changes. Man. It doesn't do anything. Okay. And it's definitely not inspiring. That 19-year-old female student who came in from Cal Berkeley by herself to find a team and build something interesting because she's got a good idea. How do you spark that? This is the creative collisions. Well, she comes in from California. There's two students that flew in from India on scholarship to ETHenver. They happen to meet at some social thing that we did for Icebreakers.
That's cool.
She has an idea that she pitches to them, and they're like, that's awesome. And they happen to be able to lay some code. They build a prototype in 2 days. They're on my stage, and they win $20,000.
That's so
And then investors see that, and they're like, holy shit, that's amazing. We want to invest in that. And then they get their first seed round for $500,000 3 months after they do it. This shit happens all the time.
Oh my
It
goodness.
happens all the time. Okay. So the point is like, but we don't know. It's unscripted because all we're doing is opening the venue and building this big tent, giving access and opportunity for these collisions to happen. And we're encouraging them. We don't know when, where, and how they're going to happen. And we don't even try to force them too much. We just try to encourage them.
Right, exactly.
And then when they happen, it's just like, yes, 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 yes. And where do you ever hear about that at a conference? I mean, conferences are fun, sure. You can go and you go to the side events and go, you can go do that. I've been to 1,000 of the same parties, okay? And they're fine. But is it really moving the needle?
Yes.
Are we really advancing the ball? If we're going to solve things like user experience in Web3, scaling, privacy, identity, reputation, consensus, governance, collaboration is the key, because 1 + 1 + 1 = 15 in terms of multiplication of value and creativity, right? So like, how do we encourage these things, but in real time to happen? So when you think about who comes to ETH Denver, mostly it's people who are ethos aligned around these ideas, these social ideas.
Right.
And so how many people do you know in your neighborhood that have these social ideas at the core of their identity? I know like one.
Exactly. I was like,
okay, so if I'm just hanging out in my average everyday life, how many interactions am I going to have that are going to create these? They're not. Okay, so all we're doing is aggregating the creativities that are interested in this to create the space where you can create the environment to let it do its thing.
Precisely. John, you first of all, you need to write that book, okay? Because we need all these stories. Second of all, I really love that there's someone like you creating this space. Allow me to just tie this all up in a knot. I don't really have questions because you really answered all of them with everything that you rattled. Usually my question is, what is the future? But you are already leading the future. You are already in the thick of it, creating these collaborations, creating this environment for everyone to thrive, and not just surface level, not just numbers.
Not just ethos either. So not just numbers, not just ethos, but both, where we can actually have good incentives to be collaborative.
Precisely.
See, I can say, be collaborative, and I might for a while because it makes sense morally, to like do that. But then once the incentives aren't there, I'm like, well, screw this. This is not good for me. Precisely. But how do we make it sustainably benevolent and sustainably incentivized economically? That's how you get it to go up. And then you just model it and then let people replicate it, right? Like if we're, so competition, the competitive mindset is a scarcity-based mindset. It will be the death of Web3 if we don't transcend it.
Oh, wow.
Think about it. We're competing with all this stuff as opposed to really thinking about collaborative solutions.
Precisely.
So human behavior is what it is, but like we've got to transcend this to get to a place where we can actually see how collaboration doesn't create scarcity. Right now, I think there's whether people acknowledge it or not, there is a deeper belief that collaboration creates scarcity. Or it limits my ability to make money. It's not true,
of course,
but it's what we believe, so it is true in the context in what we've been operating. Right. So how do we transcend that? And that's what we're trying to model, right? Fantastic. It's like, don't just do it because it's the right thing, because that's not a good reason with a long tail. That's a short tail, and it's it's almost like a moral superiority thing. Well, I'm doing this because it's the right thing, even though my selfish interests are being screwed at the same time. Of
course.
Well, no, but what if I could do the right thing and be rewarded for it?
All right.
And then we grow it. And who's complaining then, right?
Probably nobody,
because the investors like it, right? Investors like it, the corporations like it, and the contributors like it. Everyone likes it because we're not limiting ourselves to scarcity-based thinking. Now, some people might say that I'm a little idealistic or Pollyannish about some of this. But I'm not. I just built the world's largest Web3 event, period. Okay.
Boom,
And
it.
I built it on this principle.
Wow.
Okay. So like you can't like, okay, if you think ETH Denver is just successful because, well, geographically we're in a good location because it's easy to get here to DIA, the airport. Fuck out of here. Okay. Like, no, it's been culturally, systemically, technologically, socially, economically, everything designed to create this system of benevolence around technology, benevolence, and economics.
And economics. John, that
You gotta
should
have
be
all
the
three.
title of your book. That should be the title of a book. Technology, benevolence, economics. And John, I really, as much as I want to keep you on, we need to wrap this up. But I will stay connected. I will get, I'll stay updated. And for all our audiences out there, you heard it here, ETH Denver, Opolis, which is really like kind of like really revolutionizing, democratizing employment. And John, is there anything else you would love us to know? Where can we find you? How can we connect with you?
You can still come to ETH Denver. There's still time. So ethdenver.com, go apply. It's free. There's no tickets. I'm not shilling. I'm not trying to sell you anything. You might want to buy a Spork Whale plushie at some point, but like that's up to you. Come. I can't even do it justice on explaining it because it can't be described in words. It can only be experienced in person. So you have to come check it out. If you're if you're an independent worker who might be feeling like they're paying too much for health insurance, or if you want to professionalize your business, or if you're just interested in exploring how to like take the administrative pressures off of you, come to opolis.co, check it out. Opolis is a sleeping giant, in my opinion. It's big now, but like it's gonna be gargantuan, in my opinion, 5 years from now, when independent work is the commonplace thing, right?
Yes.
I mean, we're gonna see a migration back that way pretty dramatically. 100%. And there just isn't infrastructure for these workers to be able to plug in, to be supported, and to have the resources they need, and that's the gap that we're filling. But that's going to become more obvious to people in the next couple of years. But anyways, if you're an early adopter and you like the idea of being in a member-owned, public utility infrastructure like that, where you can provide, get the services, save a bunch of money, and support the cause, come check it out.
Fantastic. So the future of work and the future of collaboration, which is like a future.
Well, it's all synonymous, actually. I actually, my passion, they say, is the future of work. But then I'm like, well, in a lot of ways, Web3 as a tool set is just an enabler for that. So Web3 is, in a lot of ways, synonymous with the future of work in my mind, the future of earning, for sure.
The future of earning.
So it's not even work necessarily, but it's the future of value and the future of earning and how we monetize our networks, our time, our attention. And, the traditional concept of a 9-to-5 job is going to slowly but surely kind of not go away entirely, but it's going to start shifting where it's like, I kind of do that as part of my income. And then I add these other things. And then it's going to go to like, well, do I even really need that full-time job? Not really, because I got all these other things going on, and I value my time more than I value that. So the opportunity cost is too high now. So now I've got 8 different sources of income that are cobbling together to make my one sort of commercial experience, and none of it looks like traditional work, and some of it might even be passive. I'm staked in this one network, and I'm doing contract services over here, and I'm contributing to this over here, and it could be a bunch of things. And, work is going to transform a lot in what it means. Now, again, not that jobs are going to go away entirely, but it's going to transform a lot over the next 5 years, I suspect. So buckle up.
Buckle up, everybody. And we'll see you in the future. Check out ETH Denver. Check out Opolis. And John, thank you so much for the time. And I'll catch you.
My pleasure.
I'll catch you in the future.
I'll catch you at ETH Denver.
All right, so here's the thing. We try to get a little bit better every day, but we can't do it without you. So if you like the video, make sure to like and subscribe below. And if you have any comments, just leave them in the space under.